What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk about another movie. Now, today we're going to be talking about a movie that a lot of people requested for me to check out in the comment section of my review for I'm Still Here, a film that is coming from Brazil that got a lot of love this last year. I just checked it out. I put up a review for it actually a day before it got 3 Oscar nominations, and that review ended up becoming my highest viewed video ever. I posted that about a week ago now, and it's at about 90,000 views at this moment of filming, which is absolutely insane for a small channel like mine. I have so much growth in terms of subscribers. I had so many kind words in the comments, and I had a lot of people suggest a movie to watch from the same director that actually stars the mother of the lead actress from I'm Still Here. So with all that said, let's get into my thoughts on Central Station. Directed by Walter Salles, this film stars people like Fernanda Montenegro, Vinícius de Oliviera, Marília, Pêra, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, if you're a fan of retrospective reviews like this, early reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog, then you're in the right place, and I'd like to ask you to consider subscribing. But if you're a returning viewer, well, thanks so much for coming back. And today we're going to be talking about Central Station. And as I mentioned, this is a film that I got tons of comments about in my review for I'm Still Here to check out, that comes from the same director who did I'm Still Here. Now, in that film, Fernanda Torres plays the lead character, but as the film goes in its timeline and we get to where she's aged up, there was an actress that I thought to myself, wow, she looks just like the main actress. And it turns out it's her mother, Fernanda Montenegro, who's the star of this film. So I was excited to check this out and see a younger iteration of Fernanda Montenegro. Apparently she's a big deal over in Brazil. And this film alone, back in 1998 when it came out, ended up getting nominated for 2 Oscars, including Best Actress for Fernanda Montenegro, as well as Best International Film. It would end up winning over 40 awards in various different award shows and had another 26 or so nominations. So it was definitely a big film at the time. But as I mentioned in my review for I'm Still Here, I'm not super familiar with Brazilian films, but after the last week of my I'm Still Here video doing really well, and a lot of people just telling me to check out more Brazilian films or more Portuguese-driven films, I was excited to check out some more. And Central Station was the one I kept seeing more and more and more, as it comes from the same director, Walter Salles. So it was great to see his most recent film and then see another film that he was really critically acclaimed for. With all that said, let's get into what this film is all about, and then we'll get into my thoughts. Central Station opens up and we're introduced to the character of Mrs. Dora, or Isadora, played by Fernanda Montenegro. We learn that she's a former school teacher who now writes letters for the illiterate at this local train station and will send them out for them. Not too long into doing this, though, she ends up meeting a mother and her young son, known as Josue, who unfortunately not long after this meeting, the mother ends up passing away. So now Mrs. Dora has taken it upon herself to help this young boy get to his father that he's never met. And across the way, we end up having this road trip drama that has a very emotional core at the center of it. And that's the general gist of this film. What I can start this off by saying in terms of my positives is the cinematography here is great. And as somebody who's really familiar with 90s filmmaking, specifically here in the States and in the UK, I wasn't really familiar with a lot of Brazilian films, as I mentioned before. So to be able to see that 90s style filmmaking, but also with this different identity that made it very much a Brazilian film, I thought was great. It was great to see Brazil in that time as well. There's a lot of locations that are beautiful and stunning, and I really enjoyed the overall look of the film. I love the way a lot of these sequences were shot. There were so many moments that were clearly artistically well put together in terms of how the characters are staged and how the camera moves. I really enjoyed that element of it, and it just goes to show that Walter Salles has been a big name in the world of cinema for a long time that I wasn't aware of. And so being able to see his movies now and see how really solid he is as a filmmaker is pretty incredible. I really enjoyed the cinematography. I really enjoyed the aesthetic of this film, the shots of this film. All that was really solid for me. Add in the fact that you also have some pretty solid sound design and all those other things that make a film work, and you have a really well-made film here. But one thing I really praised I'm Still Here for are the performances. One of the things I said in my review for that film was that the performances were so realistic, and that's something that I really enjoyed about the film. There was something about it that felt like these people were real people. And I had a lot of people comment down below saying that that's pretty common when it comes down to Brazilian films. You know, when it comes down to a lot of American films or films coming from Europe or different things like that, especially if you look at something like Indian films as well, there's a theatrical element to the performances a lot of times. A lot of times there are films that are very realistic and you have that realistic approach, but there is a time where you'll watch a film and feel like, oh, this person's putting on a performance. In the case of the 2 Brazilian films I've seen recently, realism is at the core of these performances, and I think that's part of what makes these films feel so dramatic and real. You feel like you're really watching true people. You feel like you can see the flaws of these people. You can see the positives of them, the negatives of them. You can see the humanity within them. You can also see the selfishness humanness within them. And I really enjoy that about these characters because you're able to see what feels like real human people. I mentioned in my review for I'm Still Here that in my local area that I live in, there's a lot of tourists specifically from Brazil. So I do hear a lot of Portuguese around me consistently. I picked up on a couple of words here and there, but most notably, I've been able to just kind of people watch and see a lot of these Brazilian families come when they're, just making their way through this area. And a lot of times the characters I see in these movies feel very much like the individuals that I come across here in my local area. So I really enjoyed that element of the film as well, being able to feel like these were real people. And the performances I have to completely obviously praise are the main two leads, but most notably Fernanda Montenegro. Now she's in I'm Still Here, but at the very end of the film, when the character is already kind of much older, she's dealing with Alzheimer's, she's not necessarily at the same place that she was earlier in the film. So while she's giving a great performance to play that off, I didn't really get to see Fernanda Montenegro's, performance scale. I didn't get to see the range of what she was able to do. And this film for me was incredible on her performance level. She felt like a real woman. And what I thought was really interesting was the duality of these two characters. Her performance is fantastic in the film, but you also have this young boy, Josué, who's played by Vinícius de Oliveira. And I thought that they both had really interesting chemistry because there's times they don't like each other, there's times they do like each other, and there's times that they drive each other crazy, there's times that they really connect, and there's this great chemistry and bond that's built between these two characters. And one thing that I thought was really interesting is you have this older woman, she used to be a teacher, she's already established in her life, she's already matured in her life, but she has these selfish, almost childlike kind of tendencies throughout the course of the film. On the other side, you have this child who already does have these childlike tendencies, that is a little bit more rambunctious, that does have these selfish tendencies because he is a kid, but he's kind of forced to mature because of the events of what's happened here in his life with his mother dying, and now he's trying to find his father. They're struggling to find his father. So he's maturing over this journey, but also has these childlike tendencies. Meanwhile, you have this adult who's taking him on this journey to find his father, who is already matured, but also has moments where you kind of find her being a little bit childlike. And I thought that was interesting. You have these two characters that are similar in different ways, and it made for a really interesting bond. And I won't lie, there was a percentage of the film where I didn't really like either one of the characters. I found that both of them were a little bit unlikable in the first part of the film, but I think that was intentional because there's a part of this film where you're supposed to feel like they're a little bit frustrating. They're frustrating to be around together, but you can see that they care for one another. And as time went on, and as more time was spent with these characters, I found myself more and more in love with their bond, to the point where you get to the end of the film and she's able to get him to the area his father's in. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's never seen it before, because the end of the film isn't as cliche as you would expect it to be in a lot of other movies. But by the time you get to the end of the film, that bond feels so real, and I really enjoyed those two characters. It made me really appreciate the journey, and it's one of those films that you might have some moments where you're a little bit feeling like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, I don't know how I feel about this, as you're going through the film. But by the time you get to the end of the film, it really comes full circle, and it makes you feel something for these characters. And more than anything, I just really enjoyed seeing the culture here. I enjoyed hearing the Portuguese language in a full film again. I really enjoyed the characters for the most part by the time we get to the end. There's a couple of side characters in the mix that I don't necessarily think were given an abundance to do. Most notably, the character of Irene, played by Marília Pêra, who is the neighbor. I thought she was a likable character. She was a neighbor to Mrs. Dora, but they don't give her an abundance to do in the film. And along the way, we meet a couple of characters who will become a side character for a short window of time that aren't really given an abundance in the narrative. So I did kind of wish that we got to know a couple more side characters a little bit more, because I liked some of them. They just weren't there for long enough. But outside of that, I ultimately found the film to be really well made, incredibly well acted, and really emotional, really impactful. I think that this is a story about people. I love a good human story that feels realistic, and that's exactly what this film is. I think it's a film that certainly you should check out if you're a fan of film, if you're a fan of dramatic storytelling, if you're a fan of very human stories. Certainly worth your time. And I think in a time right now where a lot of people are probably going to check out I'm Still Here because of the Oscar buzz, I think it's good to go back and check out this director's other work, who that also had Oscar buzz back in the 90s, and to see how much he's grown as a filmmaker. I think that was one of the coolest parts about watching this, is that I could see that style that he has in I'm Still Here in this film, Central Station, but I can really see how he's progressed as a filmmaker. And the fact that he was able to create a film like this with Fernanda Montenegro, that was a huge thing at the time for Brazilian people and in the world of film at the time that I just wasn't aware of. And now all these years later, he's got another film that's popping off that features Fernanda Montenegro as well as her daughter Fernanda Torres. So it's really great to come all these years later and see this filmmaker to be able to have this journey with this one family in particular. And I just ultimately think that he creates human stories here. similar to I'm Still Here, I think because the subject matter and the story is a little bit sad and serious a lot of times, I don't know if this is necessarily a film I would rewatch often, but it is a film I would watch again for sure. I think it's certainly a film that's worth your time. It's really well made. And I think if you're like me and you want to start to branch out of American films or films that come from the UK, all the big mainstream stuff that everybody watches, I think that going down the line of some of these Brazilian films seems to be the right path. I'm Still Here and Central Station are two fantastic films that I recommend. I think they kind of work together in a great way to tell really human stories of different kind of struggles in life in a different place. Something that, again, here in America, there's things that these films feature that I just don't have in my life, so I don't think about. And this film makes me think about specific lifestyles and different worlds and cultures that are completely different. And I think that's something I always appreciate about diving into foreign cinema for myself. So that's going to be my thoughts on Central Station. I thought the film was really solid. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to mention. I thought that the musical score was fantastic in this film. It's piano heavy. I really enjoyed that element of the film. I thought that the musical score really added to the emotion of a lot of scenes. There's one specific theme that plays throughout the course of the film that every time it played, I found myself more endeared to the film. I found myself more connected to the messaging and the themes of this film. I really enjoyed the characters again. I enjoyed the performances. Fernanda Montenegro is fantastic. I want to see more films with her. So with all that said, leave any and all comments and recommendations down below. What film with Fernanda Montenegro should I check out next? What other Brazilian film should I check out next? I don't know when I'll do my next Brazilian film review, but I definitely wanted to get this one out immediately. But I definitely want to start building a list of films that I need to check out in the Brazilian world. So that's going to be my thoughts on Central Station. Please leave some comments down below, leave some recommendations, hit that like button, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.